I'd rather marry the devil himself than accept charity from you. The words left Lillian's mouth before she could stop them, and the man across the mahogany desk didn't even blink. Duke Rowan Everleigh just stared at her with those winter-gray eyes, waiting. Always waiting. She was drowning in debt, her father's creditors circling like vultures, and this cold bastard was her only way out. A marriage, a transaction, nothing more. But when he finally spoke, his voice was knife-sharp. Then it's fortunate I'm offering a contract, Miss Ashford, not charity. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The law offices of Whitmore and Associates smelled like old leather and older money. Lillian sat across from the Duke, her spine rigid, hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. She'd worn her best dress, which wasn't saying much anymore. The pale blue cotton had been let out twice, the lace at the cuffs carefully mended where it had started to fray. She looked like what she was, a gentleman's daughter trying desperately not to look poor. Rowan Everleigh looked like he'd been carved from ice. He was younger than she'd expected, 30, maybe 32. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been handsome if it ever showed a damn emotion. Sharp jaw. High cheekbones, those unsettling gray eyes that seemed to take in everything and give away nothing. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her father's entire estate had been worth before the creditors picked it clean. Miss Ashford. His voice was level, controlled. Do you understand the terms? She understood perfectly. Her father had gambled away their fortune, then drunk himself to death, leaving her with nothing but debts and a crumbling townhouse in the wrong part of London. The creditors wanted blood. Rowan Everleigh wanted, well, she wasn't entirely sure what he wanted, but he'd offered to pay every penny she owed in exchange for her hand in marriage. A business arrangement. That's what his solicitor had called it. I understand, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You'll reside at Everleigh Manor. You'll manage the household as you see fit. You'll attend social functions when required. He paused. In return, your debts will be settled in full. You'll receive an annual allowance for personal expenses, and you'll have the protection of my name. Protection. The word hung in the air between them like smoke. And what do you get out of this arrangement, Your Grace? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Too bold. Too direct. Women in her position weren't supposed to ask questions. For the first time, something flickered behind those gray eyes. Amusement. Irritation. It was gone before she could tell. I get a duchess, he said simply. The estates require it. Society requires it. I'm 31 years old, and my grandmother writes me weekly letters about my duty to produce an heir. He said it like he was discussing crop rotation. You need money. I need a wife who won't expect romance. It's a fair trade. Won't expect romance? Well, he wasn't wrong about that. Lillian looked down at the contract spread across the desk between them. 20 pages of legal language that basically boiled down to this. She would marry a stranger, live in his house, bear his name, and in exchange he would save her from debtor's prison. She thought about the alternative. The boarding house in Whitechapel where she'd been staying for the past 3 weeks. The landlady who looked at her like she was counting the days until Lillian couldn't pay rent. The creditors who'd started showing up at odd hours, their visits getting less polite each time. She thought about her father, passed out in his study night after night. The smell of brandy so thick you could taste it. The way he'd cried after her mother died and then never stopped drinking. The way he'd promised things would get better right up until the day they found him slumped over his desk, empty bottle in hand, heart finally giving out. She thought about being completely and utterly alone. Where do I sign? She asked. Rowan slid the pen across the desk. Their fingers didn't touch. The wedding was arranged for the following Thursday. No fanfare, no guests, just a quick ceremony at a small chapel with the vicar looking vaguely uncomfortable and Rowan's solicitor serving as witness. Lillian wore the same blue dress she'd worn to the law office. She didn't own a better one. Rowan wore black. The vicar rushed through the vows like the chapel was on fire. Do you take this woman? I do. Do you take this man? I do. You may kiss the... That won't be necessary, Rowan said quietly. The vicar blinked. Oh. Well. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you... Yes, thank you. Rowan was already turning away, adjusting his cufflinks. The carriage is waiting. And just like that, Lillian Ashford became Lillian Everleigh, Duchess of Thornfield, wife to a man she'd spoken to exactly twice. The carriage ride to Everleigh Manor took 3 hours. They sat across from each other in silence, broken only by the clatter of wheels on cobblestones and the occasional shout from the driver. Rowan read correspondence. Lillian stared out the window and tried not to think about what she'd just done. She must have dozed off somewhere past the second hour, because she woke to the carriage slowing and Rowan's voice very close. "We're here." Everleigh Manor rose out of the countryside like something from a Gothic novel, all gray stone and tall windows, surrounded by perfectly manicured grounds that stretched as far as she could see. It was beautiful in a cold, imposing sort of way, like its owner. The staff was lined up outside the main entrance. Housekeeper, butler, maids, footman, cook, groundskeeper. At least 20 people, all watching as she stepped down from the carriage. "This is the Duchess," Rowan said. No warmth in his voice, but no coldness either, just statement of fact. "She'll be managing the household from now on. Mrs. Hewitt, you'll brief her on current operations." The housekeeper, a stern-looking woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, nodded crisply. "Of course, Your Grace." "I'll be in my study," Rowan said. Then he was gone, disappearing into the house without a backward glance. Lillian stood there in her mended dress, surrounded by servants in livery finer than anything she'd worn in years, and tried to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. Mrs. Hewitt saved her. "Shall I show you to your rooms, Your Grace?" Your Grace. It sounded ridiculous, like someone was talking to a different person. "Please," Lillian managed. Her rooms, because apparently she got multiple rooms, plural, were on the second floor, east wing. A bedroom done in soft creams and golds, windows overlooking the gardens. A sitting room with a fireplace and shelves of books. A dressing room that was larger than her bedroom had been at the townhouse. "The Duke's chambers are in the west wing," Mrs. Hewitt said. She had a way of speaking that made everything sound like it was carved in stone. "You'll take your breakfast in your sitting room. Lunch is served at 1, dinner at 7. His Grace typically dines in the main hall, though he often takes his meals in his study if he's working." "I see," Lillian said, even though she didn't really see at all. "The household accounts are kept in the study downstairs. The cook will need your approval on menus by Wednesday each week. And there's the matter of the staff schedules, the grounds maintenance, the upcoming winter preparations." Mrs. Hewitt paused. "Perhaps we should review all this tomorrow, Your Grace. You must be tired from the journey." Tired didn't begin to cover it. Lillian felt like she'd been running for weeks and had finally stopped only to realize she had no idea where she'd ended up. "Tomorrow would be fine," she said. "Thank you, Mrs. Hewitt." The housekeeper nodded and withdrew, closing the door quietly behind her. Lillian stood in the middle of her new bedroom, her bedroom in a Duke's manor, in a house she'd never seen before, married to a man who'd already made it clear he had no interest in actually being with her, and felt the absurdity of it all crash over her like a wave. She'd sold herself to save herself, and she had no idea if it was the smartest or stupidest thing she'd ever done. Sat. The first week passed in a blur of learning routines she'd never had to think about before. At the townhouse, there had been 2 servants, a cook who came in daily and a maid who did everything else. Here, there were 23 people whose jobs she was now supposed to coordinate. Mrs. Hewitt helped. The woman was terrifying in her efficiency, but she seemed to respect that Lillian at least tried to understand how things worked rather than just barking orders. They went over the household accounts together. Rowan had given Lillian complete authority over domestic spending, which was startling given that he barely knew her. But then again, he clearly had no interest in managing linens and menu planning himself. She saw her husband exactly twice that first week. Once at dinner on the 3rd day, when he joined her in the dining hall, a cavernous room with a table that could seat 40 people. They sat at opposite ends like they were conducting a business meeting. He asked if she was settling in. She said yes. He asked if she needed anything. She said no. They ate in silence. The second time was when she ran into him in the library on the 5th day. She'd been exploring the house. There was so much of it, rooms she hadn't even known existed, and found the library by accident. 2 stories tall, walls lined floor to ceiling with books, a spiral staircase leading to the upper gallery. Rowan was at one of the reading tables, papers spread out in front of him, jacket discarded over the back of his chair. He looked up when she entered. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I didn't know you were— It's your house, too." He turned back to his papers. "You don't need permission to use the library." She should have left, should have backed out quietly and let him work in peace. But the books— She'd always loved books. At the townhouse, she'd read the same dozen volumes over and over because they couldn't afford new ones. And here were hundreds, maybe thousands. She drifted toward the nearest shelf, running her fingers along the spines. History, philosophy, poetry, fiction, all leather-bound, perfectly organized. "You're welcome to borrow anything," Rowan said behind her. She turned. He was watching her with that unreadable expression. "I assume you read." "I do." "Good. Most of these haven't been touched in years." He paused. "My mother collected them. She died when I was young." It was the most personal thing he'd said to her since they'd met. "I'm sorry," Lillian said quietly. He shrugged. It was a long time ago. Then he went back to his papers, and the conversation was apparently over. But as she left with a volume of Wordsworth under her arm, she glanced back and caught him watching her, just for a second. Then his eyes dropped back to his work like nothing had happened. The 10th day of her marriage, Lillian woke to find her sitting room rearranged. The furniture was the same, but it had been shifted. The reading chair that had been by the window was now angled toward the fireplace. A small table had been placed beside it, perfect height for setting down a book or teacup. The heavy curtains that had made the room dark had been replaced with lighter ones that let in more sun. She found Mrs. Hewitt supervising the maids in the hallway. "The sitting room," Lillian said. Did I request changes that I've forgotten about?" Mrs. Hewitt looked at her steadily. "His Grace gave the order yesterday evening, Your Grace. Said you seemed to prefer reading by the fire, but the chair wasn't positioned well for it." Lillian stared at her. "He said that?" "Yes, Your Grace." She didn't see how that was possible. She'd barely spoken to Rowan. How would he know where she preferred to sit? But when she went back to her rooms, the arrangement was perfect. The chair caught the warmth from the fireplace, the light from the window, and had a clear view of the gardens. It was exactly where she would have put it if she'd thought to ask. 2 days later, she came down to breakfast to find a letter waiting for her. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, bold, angular strokes. Inside was a brief note. "Mrs. Hewitt mentioned you're fond of art. There's a gallery on the 3rd floor, east side. It hasn't been opened in some time, but I've had it prepared if you wish to use it." The gallery was stunning. Tall ceilings, skylights that flooded the space with natural light, and walls that were currently bare but clearly designed to display paintings. There was an easel set up by the window. Paints, brushes, canvas. All new, all expensive. She hadn't painted since before her father died. Couldn't afford supplies. Couldn't afford the luxury of time spent on anything that wasn't trying to keep creditors at bay. She stood there for a long moment, looking at the easel, the paints, the empty canvas, waiting. He never said he cared, never asked if she wanted this. Just did it, like it was obvious. Like noticing she loved art and giving her a place to paint was as natural as breathing. That night at dinner, she'd started joining him more regularly, though they still barely spoke. She tried to thank him. "The gallery," she said. It's beautiful. Thank you." Rowan cut his beef with precise movements. "You're welcome. You didn't have to. You're my wife. You live here. It seemed reasonable to ensure you weren't bored." He said it like he was talking about ordering more firewood. Practical. Logical. Nothing to do with thoughtfulness or care. But Lillian was starting to realize something. Rowan Everleigh didn't speak in words like other people did. He spoke in actions, in quiet preparations, in things done without announcement or expectation of gratitude. She just had to learn how to listen. 3 weeks into their marriage, the nightmares started. She'd had them before. Dreams about her father's last days, about creditors breaking down the door, about being thrown into the street with nothing. But they'd faded during the chaos of the wedding and moving to the manor. Now they came back with a vengeance. She woke gasping into the dark, heart pounding, sheets tangled around her legs. The room was unfamiliar in the darkness. For a terrifying moment, she couldn't remember where she was, thought she was back in the boarding house, thought the knock on the door was the landlady coming to throw her out. Then reality settled. Everleigh Manor. Her bedroom. Safe. She was safe. She got out of bed, pulled on a robe, and paced the room until her heartbeat slowed. It was past midnight. The house was silent. She should go back to sleep. Instead, she found herself walking through the dark hallways, bare feet silent on the carpet. She wasn't sure where she was going until she ended up in the library. The fire was still burning low in the grate, and Rowan was there. He looked up from his book, eyes sharp despite the late hour, still fully dressed, though his collar was loosened and his sleeves rolled up. How long had he been down here? "Can't sleep?" he asked. She should have made an excuse, should have smiled politely and gone back to her room. Instead, she heard herself say, "Bad dream." He watched her for a moment, then nodded toward the chair across from him. "Sit, I'll call for tea." "You don't have to." "I'm awake anyway." He was already reaching for the bell pull, so she sat. A maid appeared with startling speed. Had she been waiting nearby? And returned minutes later with a tea service. Rowan poured for both of them without asking how she took it, but somehow got it right. 1 sugar, no milk. They drank in silence. It should have been awkward, but somehow it wasn't. The quiet felt comfortable, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. "What were you reading?" she asked eventually. He held up the book. Agricultural Practices in Northern Estates. Thrilling stuff. She smiled despite herself. Light reading before bed? Was that almost a smile on his face? It vanished too quickly to tell. "The northern properties need better irrigation systems. I'm researching options." He set the book aside. "What about you? Still Wordsworth?" "Byron now, actually." "Ah, the romantic." There was something in the way he said it. Not mockery exactly, but something close. Like romance was a foreign concept he'd heard about but never actually seen. "You don't approve of Byron?" she asked. "I don't approve or disapprove. Poetry isn't—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "I don't understand it. The appeal of reading about emotions that serve no practical purpose." "Not everything has to be practical, doesn't it?" He looked at her with genuine curiosity. "What's the point of dwelling on feelings that don't change anything?" She thought about that. About her father drowning in feelings, grief, guilt, despair, until they killed him. About how she'd taught herself not to feel too much because feeling meant hurting and she couldn't afford to hurt. "Maybe that's exactly the point," she said slowly. "Feelings don't change anything. So we put them in poems instead, in paintings, in stories, so we don't have to carry them alone." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I've never thought of it that way." They finished their tea. The fire burned low. Eventually, Lillian stood to go back to bed. "If you can't sleep again," Rowan said, not looking at her, "the library is always available. I'm usually here until 2 or 3. It wasn't quite an invitation, but it wasn't not an invitation either. "Thank you," she said. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Lillian." It was the first time he'd used her first name. She turned. "The nightmares," he said. "Do they happen often?" She hesitated, then, "Less than they used to." He nodded once. "Good." She went back to her room and slept without dreaming. The pattern established itself over the following weeks. Days spent managing the household, and Lillian found she was good at it, actually enjoyed the challenge of keeping everything running smoothly. Evenings sometimes spent at dinner with Rowan, sometimes alone in her rooms, and nights, when the nightmares came or when she simply couldn't sleep, she'd find her way to the library. He was always there, always awake, reading something devastatingly boring about estate management or agricultural reports or trade agreements. They'd have tea. Sometimes they'd talk, brief exchanges about books or the weather or household matters. Sometimes they'd just sit in companionable silence. She started to notice things. The way he always poured her tea first, the way he'd built up the fire before she arrived, like he was expecting her. The way he never asked about the nightmares, but would subtly shift the conversation if she seemed distressed, giving her something else to focus on. The way he noticed everything without seeming to notice anything at all. Like the week she mentioned, just in passing, during one of their rare dinners together, that she'd always loved the ocean but had never seen it, 2 days later, Mrs. Hewitt informed her that the Duke had decided to visit the coastal properties and thought she might like to accompany him. The journey took a day. They stayed at a smaller manor house overlooking the cliffs, and Rowan, who claimed he had urgent business with the estate manager, somehow had entire afternoons free to walk with her along the beach. He didn't say it was for her, didn't acknowledge that he'd arranged the whole trip because of one offhand comment. Just walked beside her in the sand, hands clasped behind his back, while she felt the sea wind in her hair and tasted salt on her lips, and felt something in her chest expand with a joy she'd almost forgotten existed. "Thank you," she said on their last evening, watching the sunset paint the water gold and crimson. "For what?" Rowan asked. "For seeing me," she wanted to say. "For paying attention. For caring in your strange, silent way." "For this," she said instead, gesturing at the ocean. "For bringing me here. I had business in the area anyway." Liar, she thought fondly. Beautiful, careful liar. 4 months into their marriage, Lillian realized she'd stopped thinking of Everleigh Manor as his house. It was theirs. Home. She knew the staff by name now, knew that young Thomas the footman was sweet on Margaret the kitchen maid, that Cook had a grandson she doted on, that the groundskeeper's dog had just had puppies. She'd rearranged the morning room to catch better light, started a small garden of her own behind the kitchen, convinced Mrs. Hewitt to update the linens in the guest rooms, even though they rarely had guests. And Rowan was still cold, still distant, still spoke in clipped sentences and showed no emotion. But he'd started joining her for breakfast, would ask her opinion on estate matters, had started sitting in the gallery while she painted, reading his reports, occasionally looking up to watch her work. He never said he enjoyed her company, but he kept seeking it out. She never said she was falling for him, but she was. It crept up on her slowly, then all at once. The way her heart would lift when she heard his voice in the hallway. The way she'd catch herself looking for him at dinner, disappointed on the rare nights he didn't join her. The way she'd memorize little details, how he took his coffee, the small scar on his left hand, the way his eyes would soften just slightly when he looked at something that pleased him. She was falling in love with her husband, her cold, silent, impossibly thoughtful husband who'd married her for convenience and somehow kept making her feel more seen, more valued, more cared for than anyone ever had. And she had no idea if he felt anything for her at all. The answer came on a Tuesday. She was in the gallery, working on a landscape of the grounds, when she heard shouting from downstairs. Male voices, angry, then footsteps pounding up the stairs. Mrs. Hewitt burst into the room, face pale. "Your Grace, there are men here. They say they're creditors of your father's estate. They're demanding—" "I'll handle it," Rowan's voice, hard as steel. He appeared in the doorway, and Lillian had never seen him look like this. Eyes blazing, jaw clenched, radiating controlled fury. "Lillian, stay here." "But stay here." Not a request, an order. Then he was gone, Mrs. Hewitt hurrying after him. Lillian set down her brush with shaking hands. This didn't make sense. Rowan had paid her father's debts. The solicitor had confirmed it. There shouldn't be any creditors left. She should have stayed in the gallery like he'd told her, should have trusted him to handle it. Instead, she followed. She heard them before she saw them. 2 men in the entrance hall, arguing with Rowan. Rough voices, the kind that belonged to the sort of men who broke fingers over unpaid debts. "Don't care what your fancy papers say," one of them was growling. "The girl's father owed our employer £20,000. We're here to collect." "Your employer is a criminal." Rowan's voice was ice. "And the debts you're claiming were settled 4 months ago. You have no legal standing here." "Legal standing?" The man laughed. "You think legality matters to us? We've got proof of debt, and we'll take payment one way or another. If not in coin, then—" He stopped because Rowan had moved. Fast. 1 second, he was across the hall. The next, he had the man by the throat, slammed against the wall. "If you," Rowan said, voice deadly quiet, "are suggesting what I think you're suggesting, then you should know that threatening a duchess is a hanging offense. And I have 12 men on this estate who would be happy to hold the rope." The second man moved toward them. 2 footmen appeared from nowhere and blocked his path. "The debts were paid," Rowan continued, not loosening his grip. I have the receipts. I have the documentation. And if you think you can come into my home and extort my wife, you are catastrophically mistaken." He leaned closer. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave, now. And you're going to inform your employer that if anyone ever approaches the Duchess of Thornfield again regarding these supposed debts, I will personally ensure that every gambling hell, every loan shark, every criminal enterprise he operates is shut down, and he spends the rest of his life in Newgate. Am I understood?" The man tried to speak, couldn't, with Rowan's hand on his throat. Rowan released him. The man stumbled back, gasping. "Get out!" Rowan said. They ran. In the silence that followed, Rowan stood perfectly still, breathing hard, hands clenched at his sides. Then he turned and saw Lillian on the stairs. His expression changed. The fury bled away, replaced by something she couldn't name. "I told you to stay in the gallery," he said. "I know." They stared at each other. The footman discreetly withdrew. Mrs. Hewitt vanished into the back hallway. "They can't hurt you," Rowan said. His voice wasn't cold anymore. It was raw, shaking slightly. "I won't let them. Do you understand? I will burn down every criminal operation in London before I let anyone touch you." And Lillian understood, finally, completely. This man who claimed he couldn't love, who'd married her for convenience, who never said he cared. He was terrified of losing her. She came down the stairs slowly, stopped in front of him. His hands were still shaking slightly. "Rowan," she said quietly. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw it. Everything he'd never said, everything he'd shown through actions instead of words, it was there in his eyes. Fear, protectiveness, desperation, love. "I'm all right," she said. "I'm safe." "You could have been—" He stopped, breathed. "If I hadn't been home, if they'd found you alone. But they didn't. You were here." She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Her hand found his. His fingers closed around hers like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. "You're always here. You've always protected me. From the moment we married, you've—" She didn't know how to finish that sentence, how to put into words everything he'd done, every quiet kindness, every silent protection, every way he'd made her feel valued without ever saying the words. "I don't know how to do this," Rowan said, still holding her hand, still looking at her like she might disappear. "I don't know how to be what you need, what anyone needs. I don't understand love. I don't understand—" "Yes, you do." She squeezed his hand. "You just don't call it that." He stared at her, and she saw the moment he understood what she was saying, saw the realization cross his face. "The library," he said slowly. "The gallery. The ocean. The tea. The fire. The chair moved so I could read in the warmth. I just wanted you to be comfortable." "I know." She smiled, felt tears prick her eyes. "That's exactly my point." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, unconscious movement, like he didn't realize he was doing it. "I can't lose you," he said finally. "I know that much. I can't— The thought of those men—" He stopped, started again. "When I married you, I thought it would be simple. A transaction. You'd have security, I'd have a wife. Nothing more complicated than that." He looked down at their joined hands. "But somewhere along the way it became complicated. You became—" Another pause. "Important. Important. From anyone else it would have been an underwhelming declaration. From Rowan, it was everything." "You became important to me too," Lillian said softly. "Somewhere between the tea and the gallery and the late nights in the library. Somewhere in all the things you did without saying you were doing them. I stopped being afraid of you and started being—" She stopped, because this was it. The moment to say it or not say it, to take the leap or stay safe. "Started being in love with you," she finished. Rowan's eyes snapped to hers, searching, like he thought he'd misheard. "You don't have to say it back," she said quickly. "I know that's not how you work. I know you show things instead of saying them. That's fine. That's enough. I just wanted you to know—" He kissed her. It wasn't smooth or practiced. It was desperate and clumsy and perfect. His hands came up to cup her face like she was something precious, something he couldn't believe he got to touch. And when they broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't know the words," he said. "I don't know how to say this right, but you're everything. You've become everything. And the thought of someone hurting you makes me want to set the world on fire." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "Is that love? Because if it is, then yes. I love you, desperately, completely, in whatever broken way I'm capable of loving." Lillian laughed, or maybe sobbed, and kissed him again. Because broken was fine. Broken was perfect. They were both broken in their own ways, pieced together by debt and desperation, and a marriage neither of them had wanted. And somehow they'd built something real anyway. "Your way of loving isn't broken," she said against his lips. "It's just quiet. But I've learned to listen." His arms came around her, holding her close. And standing there in the entrance hall of Everleigh Manor, wrapped in the arms of a man who'd married her for convenience and loved her with every action, even when he couldn't say the words, Lillian Everleigh finally understood what home felt like. The morning after the confrontation with the creditors, Lillian woke to find Rowan's side of the bed empty. Because of course there were two sides now. After their confession in the entrance hall, after that desperate, clumsy kiss, she'd found herself in his chambers that night. Not for any grand romantic reason, but because he'd refused to let go of her hand and she'd refused to let go of his. And somehow they'd ended up falling asleep tangled together on top of the covers, still fully dressed. She'd woken sometime around dawn to find him watching her in the gray light, expression unreadable. "Did you sleep at all?" she'd asked. "Some." His thumb had traced the curve of her cheekbone. "Mostly, I just watched." "That's not creepy at all." The corner of his mouth had twitched, almost a smile. "I kept thinking you'd disappear, that I'd imagined yesterday." "I'm real. This is real." "I know." But he'd pulled her closer anyway, like he needed the proof. Now she found him in his study, still in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by papers. He looked up when she entered, and something in his face softened. "You should have woken me," he said. "You needed rest." "So did you." She came around the desk. He reached for her automatically, pulling her onto his lap like it was something they'd done 1,000 times instead of never. "What are you working on?" "Damage control." His jaw tightened. "Those men yesterday, they were working for Marcus Whitmore." Lillian went still. "The solicitor?" "Your solicitor?" "Former solicitor." Rowan's voice was cold steel. "I've been going through the records. The debts I paid off 4 months ago were legitimate, but Whitmore kept the receipts and sold them to a criminal named Silas Crane. Told him you were an easy target, a woman with no family, married to a man who wouldn't care if she was threatened. He was wrong about that last part." Spectacularly wrong. Rowan's arms tightened around her waist. "Crane specializes in extortion. He buys up old debts and threatens people into paying them again, even after they've been settled. Usually targets people who can't fight back." "What are you going to do?" "Destroy him," said simply, like he was discussing the weather. "I've already contacted the magistrate. Crane's operations will be investigated. Whitmore will be disbarred and likely face criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy." Lillian twisted to look at him. "That was all in one night? I told you, I won't let anyone hurt you." He met her eyes. "That includes making sure they can't try again." She should have been disturbed by the ruthless efficiency, by how quickly he'd moved to dismantle two men's entire lives. Instead, she felt safe, protected, cherished in a way that went beyond words. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You don't need to thank me for this. This is—" He paused, searching for words. "You're my wife. My responsibility. My—" Another pause, longer this time. "Mine." The possessiveness should have bothered her. She'd spent so long fighting to be seen as a person, not a possession. But the way Rowan said it, like she was something precious he'd been entrusted with, something he'd defend with everything he had, that didn't feel like being owned. That felt like being chosen. "Yours," she agreed, then softer. "And you're mine." His eyes darkened. He kissed her, slower this time, deeper, like he was memorizing the taste of her. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I have meetings today," he said reluctantly. "Estate business. I'll be back by evening." "I'll be here." He stood, setting her gently on her feet. But at the door he stopped, turned back. Lillian. Yes? Last night, when I said I loved you. He looked uncomfortable, like the words still didn't fit right in his mouth. I meant it. In case you were wondering. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. I know you did. Good. A pause. I love you. I'm going to keep saying it until it sounds natural. It already does. He left before she could see if he was smiling, but she thought maybe he was. The household staff had clearly noticed the change. Mrs. Hewitt's expression remained professionally neutral, but there was a warmth in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Cook sent up Lillian's favorite pastries with breakfast. Even the footman seemed to stand a little straighter when she passed. By afternoon, Lillian had retreated to the gallery to work on her painting. She'd started a new piece, a portrait of the manor at sunset, all gold light and long shadows. She was mixing colors when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Not Rowan. Too light, too quick. A young woman appeared in the doorway. 25 maybe, with dark hair swept up in an elaborate style, and a dress that screamed expensive. She looked at Lillian like she was examining a piece of furniture. So you're the Duchess, the woman said. Not a question. Lillian set down her brush carefully. I am. And you are? Lady Victoria Ashworth. I'm sure Rowan has mentioned me. He hadn't. Not once. I'm afraid he hasn't, Lillian said. Victoria's smile sharpened. How fascinating. Well, I suppose I should introduce myself properly. Rowan and I were engaged. Before you, obviously. The words landed like stones in still water. I see, Lillian managed. For 3 years, actually. Everyone expected us to marry. We were perfectly matched. Same social standing, same connections, same understanding of how these things work. Victoria crossed the gallery, examining the paintings on the walls with casual disdain. And then his grandmother started pressuring him about producing an heir, and apparently he decided he needed a wife quickly. Someone convenient. Someone who wouldn't ask questions or expect romance. She turned, eyes sharp. Someone like you. Lillian's hands had gone cold. If you're trying to upset me, I'm not trying to do anything. I'm simply telling you the truth. Victoria's voice was honey-sweet and poisonous. You think yesterday meant something? That little display of protectiveness? Rowan's always been territorial about his possessions. It doesn't mean he loves you. It means he doesn't like other people touching what belongs to him. You should leave. I will. In a moment. Victoria stepped closer. I just wanted to meet the woman who was desperate enough to marry a man incapable of feeling anything, to see what kind of person settles for a cold, empty marriage just to escape debt. Her smile was vicious. Must be nice, being kept like a pet. Do you fetch when he calls? Lillian moved before she'd consciously decided to. Her hand connected with Victoria's cheek with a crack that echoed in the gallery. Silence. Victoria touched her reddening face, eyes wide with shock, then narrow with fury. You'll regret that, she hissed. Will I? Because from where I'm standing, you broke into my home, insulted me in my gallery, and tried to convince me my husband doesn't love me. Lillian's voice was steady despite the rage burning in her chest. You're the one who should be worried about regrets. Your husband, Victoria laughed, sharp and bitter. He'll always be mine. You're just warming the bed until he remembers where he actually belongs. Mrs. Hewitt, Lillian called. The housekeeper appeared almost instantly. Had she been listening? Please escort Lady Ashworth out and ensure she's added to the list of people who are never to be admitted again. Of course, Your Grace. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, then swept from the room with as much dignity as she could muster, which wasn't much considering the handprint blazing on her cheek. Lillian waited until she heard the front door slam before her knees gave out. She sat down hard on the floor, shaking. Mrs. Hewitt reappeared. Your Grace? Are you all right? Fine. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Her hand hurt from the slap and her chest felt tight, and she couldn't stop thinking about Victoria's words. Convenient. Empty marriage. Incapable of feeling. If I may speak freely, Your Grace? Mrs. Hewitt's voice was gentle. Lady Victoria has been trying to rekindle things with His Grace for years. She's proposed to him at least 6 times since their engagement ended. He's refused every time. Lillian looked up. He ended the engagement? 5 years ago. Said they weren't suited. Mrs. Hewitt's expression was carefully neutral. She didn't take it well, has been making rather desperate attempts to win him back ever since. Why didn't he tell me? His Grace doesn't talk about his past. With anyone. A pause. But I've worked in this house for 20 years. I knew his mother before she died. And I can tell you that what I've seen these past months, the way he looks at you, the things he does for you, the way he's changed. She stopped. Lady Victoria is wrong about him, and she knows it. That's why she's here. Lillian pressed her hands to her face. I hit her. Yes, Your Grace. Quite satisfyingly, I might add. Despite everything, Lillian laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. Should I send word to His Grace about the visit? Mrs. Hewitt asked. No, I'll tell him myself. She needed to. Needed to hear him say that Victoria was lying, that yesterday had meant something, that she wasn't just convenient. But when Rowan came home that evening, Lillian found she couldn't bring it up. They had dinner together. He'd started insisting on it, said he'd spent too many years eating alone, and he told her about his meetings and asked about her painting, and everything felt so normal, so right, that introducing Victoria into the conversation felt like bringing poison to the table. So she didn't. She smiled and listened and pretended everything was fine. That night, though, when they were in bed, his bed, their bed now, she found herself asking, Were you engaged before? Before me? Rowan went very still beside her. Where did you hear that? It doesn't matter. Were you? A long silence, then, yes, briefly. It ended years ago. Why? Because she wanted me to be something I'm not. His voice was flat. She wanted romance, poetry, grand gestures and passionate declarations. I couldn't give her that. So you ended it. I ended it. He turned to face her in the darkness. Why are you asking about this? She should tell him about Victoria's visit, should tell him everything. Instead, she said, I just wanted to know. He studied her face for a long moment. You're lying. Something happened today. Nothing happened. Lillian. He touched her cheek. Don't lie to me, please. And because she'd never been able to lie to him when he looked at her like that, like she mattered more than anything, she told him, all of it. Victoria's visit, the things she'd said, the slap. By the time she finished, Rowan was sitting up, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. She came here, he said quietly, dangerously quiet. Into our home, said those things to you. Rowan, I'll handle it. There's nothing to handle. Mrs. Hewitt already banned her from the property. That's not enough. He was already getting out of bed, pulling on his clothes. She needs to understand that you are not to be touched, not to be threatened, not to be upset. It's the middle of the night. Where are you going? The Ashworth estate. To have a conversation with Victoria and her father about appropriate behavior. Lillian caught his arm. Stop. Just stop. Come back to bed. She hurt you. She tried to. There's a difference. Lillian pulled him back down, refusing to let go even when he resisted. I handled it. I slapped her and threw her out, and I'm fine. You don't need to fight this battle for me. But I want to. The words came out ragged. You don't understand. When you told me what she said, about you being convenient, about me not loving you, I wanted to burn her house down. I still want to. I know, but you're not going to. Why not? Because she's not worth it. Because she's a bitter woman who can't accept that you chose someone else. And because Lillian cupped his face, made him look at her. Because I don't need you to prove anything. I already know you love me. Do you? His eyes searched hers. Because she was right about some of it. Our marriage did start as a transaction. You were convenient, and I'm not good at this. At feelings. At saying the right things. No. But you're good at showing up, at paying attention, at making sure the chair's positioned right and the fire is lit and I have a gallery to paint in. She kissed him softly. You're good at loving me in ways that matter, ways that last. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I never loved her. Victoria. In case you were wondering, the engagement was expected, logical. I thought that's what marriage was supposed to be, a reasonable arrangement between suitable people. And now? Now I know I was an idiot. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. What I have with you, this is what it's supposed to be, terrifying and overwhelming and completely unreasonable. You make me want to burn down houses for you. That's not logical. That's not suitable. That's just love, she finished. Yes, that. He kissed at her, deep and thorough. I love you. More than I thought I could love anything. And Victoria can say whatever she wants about our marriage being empty or convenient or whatever else, but she's wrong. You're not convenient. You're essential. There's a difference. Lillian felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. Essential. I like that. Good. Because you're stuck with me now. They settled back into bed, wrapped around each other. Outside, rain started to fall, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the windows. Rowan's breathing evened out, but Lillian stayed awake, listening to the storm and thinking. Victoria had been wrong about Rowan not loving her, but she'd been right about one thing. Their marriage had started as a transaction, a cold bargain between strangers. And even though it had become something more, something real and precious and worth protecting, Lillian couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria's visit was just the beginning, that there would be others who saw her as an interloper, a gold digger, a desperate woman who'd trapped a duke into marriage. She'd have to prove them wrong. All of them. She just wasn't sure how yet. The answer came 3 weeks later, in the form of a letter. Lillian was having tea in the morning room when Mrs. Hewitt brought it in, expression carefully neutral. This arrived for you, Your Grace, from the Dowager Duchess, Rowan's grandmother. They'd never met. The woman lived in Bath and rarely traveled, but Lillian had heard enough about her to be wary. The famous grandmother who'd been writing Rowan weekly letters about his duty to marry and produce an heir. The woman who'd essentially pressured him into finding a wife. The letter was written in elegant script on cream-colored paper. My dear Duchess Lillian, I hope this letter finds you well. I must confess I was quite surprised to learn of my grandson's marriage, and even more surprised to learn it occurred without informing the family. Rowan has always been independent to a fault. I'm writing to invite you both to Bath for the summer season. It's time I met my grandson's wife properly, and there are several important social events that require your attendance. The family's reputation depends on presenting a united front, and I'm sure you understand the importance of appearances. I've taken the liberty of arranging accommodations and scheduling a series of engagements. I expect you both by the end of the month. Yours sincerely, Dowager Duchess Eleanor Everleigh. Lillian read it twice. The words were polite, but the message was clear. Come to Bath and prove you're worthy of the Everleigh name, or else. Rowan's not going to like this, she murmured. Mrs. Hewitt made a non-committal sound. His Grace has avoided Bath for 5 years, says his grandmother is impossible. She sounds delightful. Oh, she's terrifying, Your Grace. Makes me look warm and fuzzy. Lillian had to laugh at that, but when Rowan came home and she showed him the letter, he didn't find it funny at all. No, he said immediately. No? No, we're not going. He tossed the letter onto his desk like it had personally offended him. My grandmother is manipulative and controlling, and she'll spend the entire visit criticizing you. I won't subject you to that. She's your family. That doesn't mean I have to like her. He pulled Lillian into his arms, resting his chin on top of her head. Besides, we're happy here. Why would we leave? Because she's right about one thing. Appearances matter. And if we don't go, people will assume we're hiding. That our marriage is... She hesitated. That it's what Victoria said. Empty, convenient, a cold arrangement. Rowan pulled back to look at her. Since when do you care what people think? Since I realize that what they think about me reflects on you, on your reputation, your family. She touched his face. I don't want to be the wife people whisper about, the one who wasn't good enough, who didn't belong. Anyone who thinks that is an idiot. Maybe, but they're idiots who control society invitations and business deals and political influence. She took a breath. I think we should go, face them head on, show them we're a real couple, a strong couple, prove Victoria and everyone like her wrong. Rowan studied her for a long moment. You're sure about this? No, but I think it's necessary. He sighed. My grandmother is going to eat you alive. Then you'll protect me, like you always do. That's not fair, using my own protective instincts against me. I learned from the best. She kissed him softly. We'll go to Bath, meet your grandmother, attend her social events, and then we'll come home and never leave again. Promise? Promise. But even as she said it, Lillian felt a flutter of unease in her chest. Because facing down a bitter ex-fiancé was one thing. Facing the Dowager Duchess and the entire social elite of Bath was something else entirely. And she had a feeling this was going to get much worse before it got better. They left for Bath on a gray morning in late May. The journey took 2 days, staying overnight at an inn that Rowan complained about the entire time. The beds were too hard, the food was mediocre, the other guests were too loud. Lillian suspected he was just anxious about seeing his grandmother, but she didn't call him on it. Bath appeared through the morning mist like something from a dream. All cream-colored buildings and elegant crescents, built around the natural hot springs that had made it famous. Beautiful in a cold, perfect way. Like a porcelain doll. Like Rowan, Lillian thought. Beautiful and perfect and completely terrifying. The Dowager Duchess's residence was in the Royal Crescent, a sweeping arc of townhouses overlooking Victoria Park. A butler who looked approximately 100 years old answered the door and led them to the drawing room. Eleanor Everleigh sat in a high-backed chair like it was a throne. 70 years old, white hair perfectly coiffed, wearing a day dress that probably cost more than Lillian's entire wardrobe. She looked at them both with eyes the same gray as Rowan's, and just as cold. "Rowan," she said, "you're late." "We arrived exactly when we said we would," Rowan replied evenly. "Yes, which is 2 hours later than when I expected you." Her gaze shifted to Lillian. "So, this is your wife." Lillian curtsied, trying to remember everything she'd learned about proper etiquette. "Your Grace, it's an honor to finally meet you." "Is it?" Eleanor's expression didn't change. "Tell me, my dear, how exactly did you manage to trap my grandson into marriage? He's avoided the institution for years, and then suddenly he marries a complete stranger in a rushed ceremony with no family present. One does wonder about the circumstances." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Grandmother, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Rowan. I'm simply curious about how this unlikely match came about." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "After all, you and Miss Ashford come from such different worlds. Her father gambled away their fortune, didn't he? Left her destitute. And you, Rowan, are worth several £1,000,000. The timing is quite remarkable." The room went very quiet. "The timing," Lillian said carefully, "was indeed remarkable. I needed help. Your grandson offered it. We married. If you're asking whether I married him for money, the answer is yes, partially. I won't lie about that." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. Rowan made a strangled sound. "How refreshingly honest," Eleanor said. "But," Lillian continued, "if you're asking whether that's all it is, a gold digger and her wealthy mark, then no. That's not what we are. Not anymore." She looked at Rowan. "We've become something neither of us expected. Something real." "Real," Eleanor repeated. "How delightfully vague." "We're in love," Rowan said bluntly. "Is that specific enough for you?" "Love." Eleanor's smile turned sharp. "How romantic. Tell me, Rowan, does she know about Victoria? About how you were engaged for 3 years and broke it off because you claimed you were incapable of love? Or have you simply told this poor girl whatever she needed to hear to keep her compliant?" Lillian felt Rowan tense beside her, felt the anger radiating off him in waves. "We're leaving," he said. "Sit down." Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. "Both of you. We have 3 weeks of social events scheduled, and you will attend every single one. You will smile and be charming and present a united front because the Everleigh name depends on it. I don't care if this marriage is real or fake or somewhere in between. What I care about is reputation." "I don't give a damn about reputation." "No, you never have." Eleanor's expression hardened. "But you should, because your wife's position in society affects your business deals, your political connections, your ability to maintain the estates and support the hundreds of people who depend on you for their livelihoods. So you will put aside your pride, and you will do your duty." The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown. Rowan looked at Lillian. She saw the question in his eyes. Do we stay or go? She thought about Victoria's accusations, about the whispers that would follow them if they ran, about proving wrong every person who thought she was just a desperate girl who'd trapped a duke. "We'll stay," she said quietly. Rowan's expression said he thought she was insane, but he nodded. "For 3 weeks. Then we're done." "Wonderful." Eleanor's smile was victorious. "The first event is tomorrow night, a ball at the assembly rooms. I've taken the liberty of arranging a dress for you, my dear. Rowan, you'll wear formal attire, and do try to smile. You look like you're attending a funeral." "I feel like I am," Rowan muttered. That night, alone in their rooms at the Dowager Duchess's residence, Rowan paced like a caged animal. "This was a mistake," he said. We should leave, now, tonight, before she makes this worse." "She can't make it worse." "You don't know her. She's going to spend the next 3 weeks tearing you apart, finding every flaw, every misstep, every reason you're not good enough for the family." He stopped in front of her. "I can't watch that. I can't sit there and let her hurt you." "Then don't let her." Lillian stood cross to him. "Stand beside me. Support me. Believe in me. That's all I need." "I do believe in you." "Then prove it. At the ball tomorrow and every event after. Show them we're real. Show them we're unshakable." She wrapped her arms around his waist. "Your grandmother wants to see us crack under pressure. Let's disappoint her." Rowan rested his forehead against hers. "You're braver than I am." "No, I'm just better at pretending." She kissed him softly. "Besides, I've got you. As long as we're together, we can handle anything. Even my terrifying grandmother and the entire social elite of Bath? Even that." But as Lillian lay in bed that night, listening to Rowan's steady breathing beside her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a very dangerous promise. Because tomorrow night, she'd have to walk into that ballroom on the arm of a duke, wearing a borrowed dress, and convince everyone there that she belonged. And she had absolutely no idea how to do that. The dress arrived at noon. Lillian stared at it hanging in the wardrobe, deep emerald silk that caught the light like water, with delicate beading across the bodice and sleeves that would leave her shoulders bare. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. It was also absolutely terrifying. "It won't bite," Rowan said from the doorway. She jumped. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough to watch you have a staring contest with a dress." He came into the room, still in his shirt sleeves, hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it, a habit he had when he was anxious. "You don't have to wear it if you don't want to. Your grandmother had it made for me. My grandmother is a tyrant who thinks she can control people through expensive gifts." He touched the silk, frowned. "Although I'll admit her taste is impeccable, this will look stunning on you." "That's what I'm afraid of." He looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'll be wearing a dress that costs more than my father's entire estate was worth, walking into a ballroom full of people who know exactly where I came from, pretending I belong there." She sat down on the edge of the bed. "What if I say something wrong? Use the wrong fork? Curtsy to the wrong person? What if I embarrass you?" Rowan knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "You couldn't embarrass me if you tried, and anyone who judges you for where you came from isn't worth impressing." "Easy for you to say. You were born into this world." "I was, and I've hated every minute of it." His grip tightened on her hands. The fake smiles, the empty conversations, the constant performance. "I've spent my entire life around these people, and I don't belong any more than you do. The only difference is I stopped caring what they think." "Well, I haven't reached that level of enlightenment yet." "Then fake it. That's what I do." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Come on, we're going out." "Out where?" "Somewhere my grandmother won't find us. I need air, and you need a distraction." They slipped out through the servants' entrance. Rowan bribed a footman with what looked like an obscene amount of money, and walked through Bath's streets like normal people. Not a duke and duchess, just a couple exploring a new city. Rowan bought her candied violets from a street vendor. They walked along the river, watching boats drift past. He told her about visiting Bath as a child, how he'd hated the hot baths his grandmother insisted were good for one's constitution. "She made me sit in scalding water for an hour every day," he said. "Said it would build character." Did it? It built resentment. But he was almost smiling. "I didn't come back for 10 years after that summer. Swore I'd never set foot in Bath again. And yet here we are." Here we are. He looked at her. I do a lot of things I swore I'd never do. For you. Something warm unfurled in Lillian's chest. That's very romantic for someone who claims not to understand romance. I'm learning. He pulled her into a small tea shop, ordered them both cups of something that smelled like oranges and spices. They sat by the window watching people pass. You know what the worst part of tonight will be? The dancing, the small talk, your grandmother's judging stare. Having to share you with a room full of people when all I want is this. You and me, drinking tea, watching the world go by. He reached across the table, threading his fingers through hers. I don't care about balls or society or any of it. I just care about you. You can't say things like that and expect me not to fall more in love with you. Good. That's the plan. They stayed until the sun started to set, painting Bath's cream buildings gold and rose. Then they walked back slowly, taking the long route, delaying the inevitable return to Eleanor's residence and the looming ball. But eventually, they ran out of streets to wander. The Dowager Duchess was waiting in the drawing room when they returned, her expression glacial. Where have you been? She demanded. Out, Rowan said simply. Out. For 5 hours. Without telling anyone. Without proper escort or security. Her voice could have cut glass. Do you have any idea how that looks? The Duke of Thornfield wandering the streets like a human being? Rowan's voice was dangerously quiet. Yes, grandmother, I'm aware of the scandal. I'll try to contain my humanity in the future. Don't be flippant with me, boy. I'm 31 years old. I stopped being a boy 2 decades ago. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Lillian stepped forward before it could get worse. It's my fault, Your Grace, she said. I asked Rowan to show me the city. I didn't realize it would be a problem. Eleanor's gaze shifted to her. Of course you didn't. You're not accustomed to the standards expected of someone in your position. No, I'm not. Lillian met her eyes steadily. But I'm learning, and I'll do better. Something flickered across Eleanor's face. Surprise, maybe, or approval. It was gone too quickly to tell. See that you do, she said. The carriage leaves for the assembly rooms at 8 o'clock. Don't be late. The ball was already in full swing when they arrived. The assembly rooms were magnificent, all high ceilings and crystal chandeliers filled with the cream of Bath society. Women in gowns that cost fortunes, men in perfectly tailored evening wear, everyone sparkling with jewels and breeding and barely concealed judgment. Lillian felt every eye turn to them as they entered. Breathe, Rowan murmured in her ear. You look beautiful. They're staring because they're jealous. They're staring because they're wondering what I'm doing here. Same thing. Eleanor materialized beside them like a particularly elegant ghost. The Duke and Duchess of Thornfield, she announced to no one in particular, but somehow everyone heard. My grandson and his lovely bride. Lovely, said the way someone might say, unfortunate. The introduction started immediately. Lord and Lady something, Sir somebody and his wife, the Honorable this or that. Lillian smiled until her face hurt, curtsied until her legs ached, and tried desperately to remember names and titles and who was connected to whom. You're doing well, Rowan said during a brief lull. My grandmother looks disappointed. Is that good? It's excellent. It means you're exceeding her expectations. He signaled a passing waiter, procured 2 glasses of champagne. Here, you've earned this. She'd just taken a sip when a familiar voice said, Rowan, what a surprise to see you here. Victoria Ashworth stood before them in a gown of pale pink, her cheek no longer showing evidence of Lillian's slap, but her eyes showing plenty of evidence of malice. Lady Victoria, Rowan said coolly, I'd say it's a pleasure, but we've established I'm bad at lying. Victoria's smile was razor sharp. Still as charming as ever, I see. And this must be your wife, the one I've heard so much about. Strange. I've heard very little about you, Lillian said sweetly. Oh, but we have met, at Everleigh Manor, though the encounter was rather brief. Victoria touched her cheek delicately. I don't believe we parted on good terms. Rowan's hand tightened on Lillian's waist. You broke into our home and insulted my wife. I'd say the terms of your departure were more than fair. Broke in? How dramatic. I was simply calling on an old friend. Victoria's eyes glittered. After all, Rowan and I have known each other for years. We have so much history, so many memories. It would be a shame to throw all that away over a hasty marriage to a stranger. And yet that's exactly what I did, Rowan said. Fascinating how that works. Before Victoria could respond, Eleanor appeared. Victoria, darling, how lovely to see you. I was just telling Lady Pemberton about your upcoming engagement to Lord Ashford. Isn't that exciting? Victoria's face went pale. That's not official yet, I know, but these things have a way of working out, don't they? Eleanor's smile was pure poison. Now, if you'll excuse us, I need to introduce the Duke and Duchess to the Harrisons. Come along, you two. She swept them away, leaving Victoria standing alone in the middle of the ballroom, looking like she'd been slapped again. That was brutal, Lillian murmured. That was Eleanor at her finest, Rowan said. She might be impossible, but she's effective. Did you know about the engagement? There is no engagement. She made it up to humiliate Victoria. His mouth twitched. I'm actually impressed. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk and careful navigation of social landmines. Lillian met what felt like half of England's aristocracy, all of them assessing her with varying degrees of subtlety. Some were kind, most were curious, a few were openly hostile. But Rowan never left her side. His hand stayed at her waist, steady and grounding. When she stumbled over a title, he smoothly corrected it. When someone asked an invasive question about their courtship, he deflected with icy politeness. When she needed a break, he'd guide her to a quieter corner, fetch her water, give her space to breathe. You're very good at this, she said during one such break. At what? Taking care of me, even in the middle of all this chaos. He looked at her like she'd said something profound instead of obvious. That's what I do. That's all I know how to do. The orchestra struck up a waltz. Couples flooded the dance floor. Dance with me, Rowan said. I don't know how. Not properly. Not like these people. I'll teach you. He offered his hand. Trust me. She did. She took his hand and let him lead her onto the floor, acutely aware of everyone watching. But the moment his hand settled at her waist, the moment they started moving, everything else faded away. He was right. She didn't know the steps properly. She stumbled twice, stepped on his foot once. But he just adjusted, guiding her through it, making it look intentional. See, he murmured, you're a natural. I'm a disaster. You're beautiful. Pulled her closer than was probably proper. And everyone in this room knows it. She looked up at him, saw the way he was looking at her, like she was the only person who existed, like the entire ballroom had disappeared and it was just the two of them, and felt something shift in her chest. This man, this cold, distant, impossible man who'd married her out of convenience and then spent every day since trying to make her happy in quiet, unspoken ways. Who'd defended her against creditors and ex-fiancés and his own terrifying grandmother, who was holding her now like she was something precious. She loved him. Completely, irrevocably. So much it scared her. The music ended. Applause rippled through the room. Rowan led her off the floor, but before they could reach the edge, a man stepped into their path. Tall, well-dressed, handsome in a sharp, predatory way. He looked at Lillian with eyes that made her skin crawl. Your Grace, he said to Rowan, might I request an introduction to your lovely wife? Rowan's entire body went rigid. Lord Blackwood, I didn't realize you were in Bath. Just arrived yesterday. Couldn't miss the season. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. And I had to see for myself if the rumors were true. The Duke of Thornfield married to a nobody. Quite the scandal. Lady Lillian is a duchess, Rowan said quietly. Too quietly. Address her as such. Of course. My apologies, Your Grace. Blackwood bowed mockingly. I meant no offense. I'm simply curious about how a gentleman's daughter with no fortune, no connections, and a dead father who drank himself into the grave managed to secure one of England's most eligible bachelors. The room had gone silent. Everyone was listening now. Lillian felt Rowan's fury like a physical thing, felt the moment he decided to do something violent. She squeezed his arm hard. I'll answer that, she said, before Rowan could speak. I married him because he asked. He married me because he wanted to. The circumstances of my father's death and my financial situation are none of your concern, Lord Blackwood. But since you're so curious, yes, I was poor. Yes, I was desperate. And yes, I would make the same choice again. Because marrying Rowan was the best decision I've ever made. Blackwood's smile widened. How refreshingly honest. Most women in your position would at least pretend the marriage was a love match. It is a love match, Lillian said. I love him. He loves me. The fact that we also solve practical problems makes us smart, not mercenary. Does he love you? Blackwood looked at Rowan. Because I've known Rowan Everleigh for 15 years, and I've never seen him love anything except his ledgers and his estates. The man's made of ice. Everyone knows it. You don't know anything about me, Rowan said. Don't I? You broke Victoria's heart because you couldn't be bothered to feel anything for her. You've spent your entire adult life avoiding emotional entanglements, and now suddenly you're in love? Blackwood laughed. Forgive me if I'm skeptical. Believe whatever you want. I don't care. But your wife should care. She should know what kind of man she married. Blackwood turned to Lillian. Ask yourself, Your Grace, has he ever actually said he loves you, or does he just perform the necessary actions to keep you compliant? The words hit like a physical blow. Because yes, Rowan had said it. But only after she'd said it first. Only after she'd pushed him. And yes, he showed her through actions. But was that love, or was it just him being thorough? Making sure his investment was protected? No, that wasn't fair. She knew Rowan, knew how he felt. Of course he's said it, she managed. Has he? Blackwood's eyes gleamed. Or are you just telling yourself what you need to hear to justify selling yourself for security? Rowan moved so fast Lillian didn't see it happen. One moment Blackwood was standing there smirking, the next Rowan had him by the throat, slammed against the nearest pillar. Say one more word about my wife, Rowan said, voice deadly calm, and I will break every bone in your body. Do you understand me? The ballroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Eleanor was pushing through the crowd, face thunderous. Security was moving toward them. Rowan, Lillian said urgently, let him go. Not until he apologizes. You're making a scene. I don't care. His hand tightened on Blackwood's throat. The man was turning red. Apologize to her, now. Rowan, please. Lillian touched his arm. He's not worth it. Let him go. For a long moment, Rowan didn't move. Then slowly, he released Blackwood. The man slumped against the pillar, gasping. Get out, Rowan said, before I change my mind. Blackwood stumbled away into the crowd. The whispers grew louder. Eleanor reached them, face white with fury. What? She hissed. Do you think you're doing? Defending my wife. By assaulting a peer in the middle of a ball? By creating a spectacle that will be gossiped about for months? She grabbed his arm. Come, now, all of you. We're leaving before this gets worse. They made it to the carriage in tense silence. The moment the door closed, Eleanor exploded. Do you have any idea what you've done? The scandal this will cause? Lord Blackwood has connections everywhere, political connections, business connections. He could destroy you. He insulted Lillian. So what? Eleanor's voice was sharp as glass. People insult each other in society all the time. You smile and move on. You don't assault them in public. I'm not going to smile while someone calls my wife a gold digger. Then you shouldn't have married one. The words hung in the air like poison. Lillian felt something crack inside her chest. Because Eleanor wasn't wrong. She had married Rowan for money, had taken his offer because she was desperate and drowning, and he was a lifeline. The fact that it had become something more, that didn't change how it started. Stop the carriage, she said. What? Rowan looked at her. Stop the carriage. I need air. She couldn't breathe. The corset was too tight, the carriage too small, Eleanor's words echoing too loud in her head. Stop! The driver pulled over. Lillian stumbled out into the street, gasping. They were somewhere in the middle of Bath, buildings rising on either side, street lamps casting long shadows. Rowan was beside her immediately. Lillian, don't. She held up a hand. Just give me a minute. My grandmother didn't mean... Yes, she did, and she's right. Lillian wrapped her arms around herself. I am a gold digger. That's exactly what I am. I married you for money, to escape debt, to save myself. Everyone knows it. Blackwood knows it. Victoria knows it. Your grandmother knows it. I don't care. You should. Because every time we go out, every time we're in public, people are going to look at me and see exactly what I am. A desperate woman who trapped a duke. She laughed, but it came out broken. And the worst part? They're not even wrong. Stop. Rowan grabbed her shoulders, made her look at him. You didn't trap me. I chose you. I asked you to marry me. I knew exactly what I was doing. You needed a wife. Any wife. I was just convenient. You were never just convenient. His voice was fierce. Yes, I needed a wife. Yes, you needed money. But I could have married anyone. Do you understand that? I could have married Victoria or any of a dozen other women who've been throwing themselves at me for years. I chose you. Not because you were desperate, because you were honest. Because you didn't pretend to love me or want me for anything other than what I could provide. Because you were real. That's not a compliment. Yes, it is. It's the biggest compliment I know how to give. He pulled her closer. Everyone else in my life wants something from me. My title, my money, my connections. You were the only one who was honest about it, who didn't dress it up in fake romance or false promises. And then he stopped, breathed. Then you stayed. After the debts were paid and you were safe, you stayed. You could have left, could have taken the money and disappeared, but you stayed and you built a life with me, and you made me feel things I didn't think I was capable of feeling. Tears were streaming down Lillian's face now. Rowan, I love you. The words came out raw, desperate. Not because you needed me, not because of some transaction or arrangement. I love you because you're brave and strong and you slapped Victoria Ashworth across the face. I love you because you painted the manor at sunset and because you drink your tea with one sugar and because you read Byron even though you know I don't understand poetry. I love you because when I wake up and you're there, the world makes sense in a way it never has before. He cupped her face, thumbs wiping away her tears. So yes, he said, our marriage started as a transaction, but it stopped being one the moment you smiled at me in the library, the moment you trusted me with your nightmares, the moment you looked at me like I was something more than a cold bastard with a title. His voice broke. You are not convenient. You are not a gold digger. You are my wife, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure everyone knows it. Lillian couldn't speak, could barely breathe. All she could do was kiss him, hard and desperate and absolutely not appropriate for a public street. When they broke apart, both gasping, she pressed her forehead to his. I love you, she whispered. Even when you're being dramatic and assaulting peers at balls. Especially then, I hope. Especially then. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other while Bath's evening traffic moved around them. Eventually, Eleanor cleared her throat from the carriage. Are you two quite finished? We're blocking the street. Rowan helped Lillian back into the carriage. Eleanor looked at them both with an unreadable expression. That was quite a speech, she said to Rowan. It was the truth. I know. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. I was wrong. About her, about both of you. Lillian stared at her. What? I said I was wrong. Don't make me repeat it. But Eleanor's voice was softer than Lillian had ever heard it. I thought you were a fortune hunter. I thought Rowan had made a foolish decision in a moment of weakness. But watching him defend you tonight, watching you defend each other. She stopped. That's not a convenient arrangement. That's a marriage. Yes, Rowan said simply. It is. Then I apologize. To both of you. Eleanor looked at Lillian directly. You've made him happy. Happier than I've seen him since his mother died. That's worth more than all the perfect breeding and connections in the world. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but from Eleanor Everleigh, it was practically a declaration of love. Thank you, Lillian managed. The carriage rolled on through Bath's streets. Lillian leaned against Rowan's shoulder, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, but somehow lighter than she'd felt in weeks. They'd survived the ball, survived Blackwood's accusations and Eleanor's anger, survived the worst that Bath society could throw at them. Or so she thought. They were almost back to Eleanor's residence when another carriage pulled alongside theirs. Too close, moving too fast. Lillian had just enough time to think that's odd before it swerved sharply, slamming into their side. The impact threw her across the carriage. She felt Rowan's arms around her, pulling her close, protecting her as they crashed. Heard Eleanor's scream, the horses shrieking, the awful sound of wood splintering. Then everything went dark. Pain woke her, sharp and immediate, radiating from her left shoulder down through her ribs. Lillian tried to move and gasped, the sound foreign in the darkness. Something heavy was pressed against her. Rowan, she realized, still holding her, still protecting her even unconscious. Rowan. Her voice came out hoarse. She tried again, louder. Rowan. He stirred, groaned. Lillian, are you… He shifted and she felt him wince. Are you hurt? My shoulder, I think I… She tried to move again and nearly screamed. Something's wrong. Don't move, just stay still. His voice was strained. She heard him fumbling in the darkness, then swearing viciously. The door's jammed. Grandmother? Silence. Then weak but furious. I'm alive. Barely. What in hell happened? Someone hit us. Rowan was moving carefully, trying to shift without jostling Lillian. Deliberately. That wasn't an accident. The words sent ice through Lillian's veins. Not an accident. Someone had tried to… We need to get out, Eleanor said. Her voice was shaking slightly. Now, before they come back. Rowan kicked at the door. Once, twice. On the third kick, it gave way with a shriek of twisted metal. Cold air rushed in, along with the smell of smoke. The other carriage is on fire, Rowan said grimly. Can you move, Lillian? She tried. The pain in her shoulder was excruciating, but she managed to sit up with his help. I think so. Good. We need to go. Now. He helped her out first, every movement sending fresh agony through her shoulder. Then Eleanor, who moved like every bone in her body hurt but refused to show it. Rowan climbed out last, and Lillian saw blood streaming from a cut above his eye. You're bleeding, she said. I'm fine. You're not. He touched her shoulder gently, and she hissed in pain. Dislocated, maybe broken. We need a doctor. We need to get away from here, Eleanor interrupted. She was staring at something behind them. Look. The other carriage was burning bright against the dark street, flames licking up toward the sky, but there was no driver, no horses, just the fire and the wreckage of their own carriage and the empty street. They left, Rowan said quietly. Whoever did this, they hit us and ran. Not just ran, Eleanor pointed. Written in chalk on the street, barely visible in the firelight, leave Bath, or next time we aim better. Lillian felt Rowan go absolutely still beside her, the kind of stillness that came before violence. Who did this? She asked. I have an idea. His voice was cold enough to freeze blood. Blackwood. He has the connections, the resources, and the motive. We humiliated him tonight. You can't know that for certain. No. But I'm going to find out. He looked at Eleanor. Take Lillian to the physician. Get her shoulder treated. I'll meet you back at the residence. Where are you going? Lillian demanded. To have a conversation with Lord Blackwood. Like hell you are. She grabbed his arm with her good hand, ignoring the pain the movement caused. You're bleeding, you're angry, and you're about to do something stupid. I'm not letting you go alone. You're injured. So are you, and I'm still not letting you go. They stared at each other. Eleanor cleared her throat. For what it's worth, she said, the girl's right. You're in no state to confront anyone, and if Blackwood is behind this, you'll need proof, not just accusations. She straightened her dress, somehow managing to look dignified despite being covered in dust and blood. We all go to the physician. Then we regroup. Then we plan our next move like rational people instead of hot-headed idiots. Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, but after a long moment, he nodded. The physician's office was a cramped room above an apothecary shop. The doctor, an elderly man with steady hands and kind eyes, examined Lillian's shoulder, pronounced it dislocated but not broken, and proceeded to pop it back into place with a movement that made her scream. Sorry, Your Grace, he said sympathetically. Necessary evil. You'll need to keep it immobilized for a few weeks. No heavy lifting, no sudden movements. While he bound her shoulder and arm in a sling, he examined Rowan's head wound, stitched it with neat precision, and checked Eleanor for injuries. She'd escaped with nothing worse than bruises and a twisted ankle, though she'd rather die than admit the ankle hurt. You were lucky, the doctor said as he cleaned up. Carriage accidents can be deadly, especially ones that involve fire. It wasn't an accident, Rowan said bluntly. Someone tried to kill us. The doctor's hand stilled. Have you reported this to the authorities? Not yet, but we will. They returned to Eleanor's residence as dawn was breaking. The house was in an uproar, servants running everywhere. Someone had already sent for the magistrate, and there were at least a dozen notes waiting from various members of society who'd heard about the crash. Eleanor swept through it all like a general commanding troops. No visitors. Tell everyone we're fine but resting, and someone bring tea to the drawing room, strong tea, with brandy. They gathered in the drawing room, all three of them battered and exhausted. The tea arrived, Cook had added enough brandy to kill a horse, and they drank in silence for a moment. We need to talk about what happens next, Eleanor said finally. I'm going after Blackwood, Rowan said. With what proof? A threatening message written in chalk? That's not evidence, that's barely a clue. Then I'll find evidence. Or, Lillian said quietly, we do what the message said. We leave Bath. They both turned to stare at her. Absolutely not, Rowan said. I'm not letting whoever did this win. I'm not running. It's not running. It's strategy. She set down her teacup carefully. They want us to leave. So we announce we're leaving. We make a big show of it. Tell everyone we're going back to Everleigh Manor because of my injury. We let them think they've won. And then we stay. Quietly. We don't actually leave Bath. We just move somewhere else, somewhere they won't look for us. And we investigate. Find proof of who did this and why. Eleanor was watching her with an odd expression. That's remarkably devious. I learned from desperate times, when you can't fight head-on, you fight smart. It could work, Eleanor said slowly. I have a property on the outskirts of Bath. Small cottage, very private. No one would think to look for a duke and duchess there. No one except the staff, Rowan pointed out. The staff at this residence are loyal to me. They'll keep quiet if I ask them to. Eleanor leaned forward. We announce your departure publicly. Send notes to all the right people. Make sure the gossip spreads. Then we sneak you to the cottage tonight. From there, you can investigate without anyone knowing you're still in Bath. Rowan looked at Lillian. You're sure about this? I'm sure about not dying in a carriage fire. I'm sure about finding whoever tried to kill us. The rest, she shrugged with her good shoulder. We'll figure it out as we go. That's not exactly a solid plan. It's better than charging into Blackwood's house and getting yourself killed. She met his eyes. Trust me, please. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I always trust you. The next few hours passed in a flurry of carefully orchestrated chaos. Eleanor drafted notes announcing their departure. So sorry to leave early. The Duchess's injury requires immediate rest. We'll return to Bath another season. And had them delivered to every important household in the city. Word spread like wildfire. By noon, half of Bath knew the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield were leaving in disgrace. The magistrate arrived to take their statement about the crash. Eleanor handled most of the talking, explained about the collision, the threatening message, their suspicions about it being deliberate. The magistrate took notes, looked skeptical, and promised to investigate. Don't hold your breath, Eleanor muttered after he left. Blackwood has too many friends in high places. The magistrate won't touch him without ironclad proof. Then we'll get ironclad proof, Lillian said. That evening, as sunset painted Bath's buildings gold and crimson, a carriage pulled away from Eleanor's residence. Inside were two figures that could have been the Duke and Duchess, if you squinted. In reality, they were servants in borrowed clothes, traveling to a coaching inn where they'd catch transport back to London. Meanwhile, in the servants' entrance at the back of the residence, Rowan helped Lillian into a plain wagon driven by Eleanor's most trusted groundskeeper. They were dressed simply, Lillian in a borrowed maid's dress, Rowan in workman's clothes. Nothing that would draw attention. Eleanor climbed in beside them. This is insane, she said. I'm 70 years old. I should be drinking tea and judging people, not sneaking around in wagons like a criminal. You love this, Rowan said. I absolutely do. It's the most excitement I've had in years. The cottage was small but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, a kitchen. Isolated enough that no one would stumble across them by accident. The groundskeeper had already stocked it with supplies and left a stack of wood by the fireplace. I'll come by every few days with news from the city, Eleanor said. And if you need anything, send word through Thomas. He's the groundskeeper. He's been with me for 40 years and knows how to keep his mouth shut. After she left, Lillian and Rowan stood in the small sitting room looking at each other. This is definitely not how I expected our time in Bath to go, Lillian said. Better or worse than attending balls and making small talk? Well, no one's tried to kill us at a ball, so that's something. She moved to the window, looking out at the darkening countryside. What do we do now? Now we rest. Tomorrow we start investigating. He came up behind her, carefully wrapping his arms around her waist, avoiding her injured shoulder. You're sure you're all right? My shoulder hurts, I'm exhausted, and someone tried to murder us, but other than that, I'm fantastic. He pressed a kiss to her hair. I'm sorry for all of this. If I hadn't lost my temper with Blackwood, he would have found another excuse to come after us. Men like that always do. She leaned back against him. This isn't your fault. Feels like it is. They stood there as darkness fell, holding each other, both of them trying not to think about how close they'd come to dying, how the crash could have been so much worse, how they might not have woken up at all. Rowan? Lillian said quietly. Hmm? When we were in the carriage after the crash, you were still holding me. Even unconscious, you were still trying to protect me. Of course I was. That's not an of course. That's... She turned in his arms, careful of her shoulder. That's everything. You don't even think about it. You just do it. Take care of me. Keep me safe. Like it's as natural as breathing. He looked uncomfortable. I don't know how else to be. Not with you. I know. That's what makes it so... She stopped, searching for the right word. Perfect. Not in a fairy tale way. In a real way. You love me in the most practical, unglamorous way possible, and it's the most romantic thing anyone's ever done for me. Making sure you don't die in a carriage crash is romantic. When you do it, yes. She kissed him softly. I love you. Your impossible, awkward, completely sincere love, all of it. Good. Because you're stuck with it. He kissed her back, deeper this time. Forever, if I have anything to say about it. They made their way to the bedroom, really just a small room with a bed barely big enough for two people, and collapsed onto it fully clothed, too exhausted to do anything but hold each other and sleep. The next morning, Rowan woke early and disappeared. Lillian found him an hour later in the cottage's small kitchen, surrounded by papers. Where did all this come from? She asked. Eleanor sent it over with Thomas this morning. Financial records, property deeds, correspondence, everything she could find on Blackwood's business dealings. He looked up, eyes sharp despite the lack of sleep. I've been going through it. There's something here. I can feel it. What kind of something? Blackwood's been buying up properties all over Bath, mostly along the routes where new roads are planned. He's positioning himself to make a fortune when the city expands. That's not illegal? No. But the way he's getting the information about the road plans might be. Eleanor thinks he's bribing someone in the city planning office. Rowan tapped one of the documents. If we can prove that, we have leverage. Lillian sat down across from him, studying the papers. This is good, but it's not enough to prove he tried to kill us. No, but it's enough to make him nervous. And nervous people make mistakes. They spent the day going through Eleanor's documents, mapping out Blackwood's business dealings, looking for patterns and weaknesses. By evening, they had a clearer picture. Blackwood was deeply in debt despite his wealth, had made several risky investments that were failing, and was desperately trying to keep up appearances while his finances crumbled. He's desperate, Lillian said. That makes him dangerous. It also makes him sloppy. Rowan leaned back, rubbing his eyes. Eleanor's hosting a garden party tomorrow. Half of Bath society will be there. Blackwood will attend. He can't afford not to, or people will wonder why. We use that. Use it how? We send him a message. Let him know we found evidence of his bribery schemes. Suggest we might be willing to keep quiet for a price. That's extortion. No, that's bait. Rowan's smile was cold. He'll either pay us to be quiet, which gives us proof he's guilty, or he'll try something else to shut us up, which gives us proof he was behind the carriage crash. Or he'll just have us killed. He'll try. But this time, we'll be ready. Lillian looked at him, at the determination in his face, the protective fury he was trying to contain. This man who'd been content to manage his estates and avoid society had transformed into someone willing to play dangerous games to keep her safe. You've thought this through, she said. I've thought of nothing else since the crash. And if it goes wrong, it won't. Rowan. He reached across the table, took her hand. I won't let him hurt you again. I won't let anyone hurt you. That's not bravado or empty promises. That's just fact. The next afternoon, Thomas arrived at the cottage with news. Eleanor's garden party was in full swing. Blackwood had attended, as predicted, and he'd received a very interesting letter, delivered anonymously, of course, suggesting the sender had information about his business dealings that might be of concern. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, Thomas reported. Went pale, made his excuses, left early. Her Grace said to tell you he took the bait. Good, Rowan said. Now we wait. The wait was excruciating. Lillian paced the cottage, shoulder throbbing, unable to sit still. Rowan pretended to read, but she could see him watching the windows, listening for sounds of approach. The message came at dusk. A boy from the village carrying a note addressed to the Duke of Thornfield, wherever he may be hiding. Rowan opened it, read it, and smiled grimly. He wants to meet, tonight, the old Roman baths after they close. It's a trap, Lillian said immediately. Probably, but it's also our chance to get proof. He looked at her. I'm going. You're staying here. Like hell I am. Lillian, we've had this argument before. I'm not letting you walk into danger alone. You're injured. So are you. And I'm still coming. She crossed her arms. You can waste time arguing, or you can accept that we're doing this together. Your choice. He stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. You're impossible. I learned from you. They arrived at the Roman baths just after dark. The ancient structure loomed in the shadows, stone columns and still water, steam rising in ghostly wisps. It was beautiful and eerie and absolutely the perfect place for a confrontation. Blackwood was waiting by the main pool, flanked by two large men who were clearly there for muscle, not conversation. Your Grace, he said as they approached. I'm surprised you came. Most people who receive threatening letters have the sense to stay in hiding. Most people don't have evidence of bribery and fraud in their back pocket, Rowan replied evenly. We need to talk. Do we? Because from where I'm standing, you're a desperate man trying to bluff his way out of a very dangerous situation. Blackwood smiled. You have no proof of anything. You're just fishing, hoping I'll incriminate myself. Am I? Rowan pulled a document from his coat. This is a ledger showing payments to a city clerk named Morrison. £30 a month, regular as clockwork, in exchange for advance notice of road planning decisions. That's bribery, Lord Blackwood, and it's enough to have you arrested. Blackwood's smile faltered. You're lying. That ledger doesn't exist. It exists because your bookkeeper is very thorough, almost too thorough. He kept copies of everything. Rowan took a step closer. And before you think about having us killed to keep us quiet, we've already sent copies to the magistrate to be opened if anything happens to us. So you can try to have us murdered again, but it won't save you. Again? Blackwood laughed, but it sounded forced. I don't know what you're talking about. The carriage crash. The threatening message. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you weren't involved. For a moment, Blackwood said nothing. Then he nodded to his men. They moved forward. Rowan stepped in front of Lillian, shielding her. You really want to do this here, in the middle of Bath, where anyone could walk by? No one's walking by. The baths are closed, and by morning, this will all be over. Blackwood's voice was cold. I tried to warn you, tried to give you a chance to leave quietly, but you just couldn't let it go, could you? Had to play the hero for your little gold-digger wife. Call her that again, Rowan said quietly, and I'll break your jaw before your men can take a step. Rowan, Lillian said urgently. She'd been watching the shadows around the baths. We're not alone. Figures emerged from the darkness. Not Blackwood's men. These wore the uniform of the city watch. At least 8 of them surrounding the pool, and at their head was Eleanor, looking like an avenging angel in midnight blue. Lord Blackwood, she said pleasantly, what an interesting conversation we've just witnessed. Very enlightening. Blackwood's face went white. This was a setup. Of course it was. Did you really think my grandson would be foolish enough to confront you alone? Eleanor nodded to the watch captain. You heard everything? Every word, Your Grace, including the confession about the carriage crash. Excellent. Arrest him. You can't. I didn't confess to anything, Blackwood was backing away, but the watchmen were closing in. "You have no proof." "No, we have your words, witnessed by 8 members of the watch," Eleanor said. "We have the financial records showing your bribery scheme. And we have the testimony of your own driver, who was very eager to talk once we offered him immunity. He described in great detail how you paid him to cause the crash and leave the threatening message." Blackwood lunged toward Rowan, or maybe toward the ledger. It was hard to tell. Either way, he didn't make it 3 steps before the watchman had him pinned. "This isn't over," he snarled as they dragged him away. "I have powerful friends. They'll distance themselves from you the moment the scandal breaks," Eleanor interrupted, "which should be right about—" She pulled out a pocket watch. "Now, I may have mentioned your arrest to a few select members of society. You know how gossip spreads." She hadn't just beaten him, she'd destroyed him. His reputation, his business, his standing in society, all gone in one night. Lillian stared at Eleanor with newfound respect. That was brutal. That was necessary. Eleanor's expression was hard. "He tried to kill my family. I don't take that lightly." After the watch had taken Blackwood away, after they'd given their statements and Eleanor had finished orchestrating the social destruction of everyone involved in the plot, the 3 of them stood by the pool in the quiet darkness. "We can go back to the residence now," Eleanor said. "The threat's gone. You're safe." "Not yet," Lillian said. She was looking at the water, at their reflections rippling on the surface. "There's one more thing we need to do." The ball was 2 nights later. Eleanor had insisted. If they were going to reclaim their place in Bath society, they needed to do it properly. Make a statement. Show everyone that the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield were not victims, not running, not afraid. Lillian wore a new dress, deep sapphire blue that made her eyes look almost violet. Her arm was still in a sling, but she'd convinced the physician to give her something more elegant than the plain cotton binding. Rowan wore black again, but this time with a waistcoat embroidered in silver thread that caught the light. They entered the assembly rooms together, and the entire ballroom fell silent. Then Eleanor stepped forward, her voice carrying across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I present my grandson, the Duke of Thornfield, and his wife, the Duchess Lillian." The applause started slowly, then grew. By the time they reached the center of the room, it was thunderous. People crowded around them, offering congratulations on surviving the crash, expressing outrage at Blackwood's attack, praising their bravery and staying to see justice done. The same people who'd whispered about Lillian being a gold digger now treated her like a hero. "You should say something," Rowan murmured. "Me? You're the Duke. You're the one they want to hear from." Lillian looked at the crowd, at all these wealthy, powerful people waiting for her to speak. A month ago, she would have been terrified. Now she just felt tired and angry and done with pretending. "I don't belong here," she said loudly. The room went quiet again. "I come from nothing," she continued. "My father lost everything. I was drowning in debt with nowhere to go. And when the Duke offered to marry me, yes, I took it. Because I was desperate and scared and I needed help. I won't apologize for that. I won't pretend I married for love at first sight or any of the romantic nonsense you all want to believe." She could feel Rowan tense beside her, but she kept going. But somewhere between signing the contract and now, something changed. "I fell in love with a man who shows his feelings through actions instead of words, who lights the fire before I wake up and moves furniture so I can read in comfort, who risked everything to keep me safe." She looked at Rowan. "He's not perfect. Neither am I. But we're real. And that's worth more than all the perfect breeding and proper marriages in this room." She turned back to the crowd. "So yes, I was poor. I married for money. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because it led me here. To him. To the best decision I ever made." For a moment, no one moved. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the entire room erupted in applause again, louder this time, genuine. Rowan pulled her close, careful of her shoulder, and kissed her in front of everyone. Not a polite society kiss, a real one. The kind that said mine and yours, and together in a way words never could. When they broke apart, he was smiling, actually smiling. "That was quite a speech," he said. "I learned from watching you defend me." She touched his face. Figured it was my turn. The orchestra started playing. Rowan led her onto the dance floor, and this time she didn't stumble. This time she knew the steps. This time she belonged. As they waltzed past Eleanor, the Dowager Duchess caught Lillian's eye and nodded. Just once. But it was enough. Approval. Acceptance. Respect. They'd won. The morning after the ball, Lillian woke to find Rowan already awake beside her, propped up on one elbow, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're doing it again," she mumbled into the pillow. "The creepy watching thing. I'm appreciating my wife. There's a difference." "Is there?" She opened one eye. "What time is it?" "Early. The sun's barely up." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I was thinking. Dangerous. About last night. What you said to all those people." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "You didn't have to do that. Defend our marriage. Admit to everything." "Yes, I did. I was tired of hiding." She turned to face him properly, wincing as her shoulder protested the movement. "I was tired of letting other people define what we are. So I defined it myself." "You told an entire ballroom you married me for money." "I did. Because it's true. Part of the truth, anyway." She touched his jaw, felt the stubble there. "The rest of the truth is that I'd marry you again tomorrow, for nothing. For worse than nothing. Just to have this." He kissed her palm. "We should go home." "To Eleanor's residence?" "To Everleigh Manor. Our home." He looked almost shy saying it. "I know my grandmother wants us to stay for the rest of the season. Do the social rounds, cement our position, but I want to go home. With you. Away from all this." Lillian felt something warm bloom in her chest. "You're choosing me over duty, over what's expected. I'm choosing us. There's a difference." He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "I've spent my entire life doing what was expected. Being the perfect duke, managing the estates, maintaining appearances. And I was miserable. Then you came along and everything changed. You made me realize that none of that matters if I'm not happy, if we're not happy. Eleanor's going to kill you. Probably, but she'll get over it." He pulled Lillian up carefully, mindful of her injured shoulder. "Besides, she got what she wanted. We proved we're a real couple. We survived attempted murder and social scrutiny. I think that's enough socializing for one season." They told Eleanor over breakfast. She took it better than expected, which is to say she only threatened to disown Rowan twice and called them both ungrateful exactly once. "Fine," she said finally, setting down her teacup with enough force to rattle the saucer. "Go. Run back to your manor and your quiet life. See if I care." "You do care," Rowan said. "That's why you're angry." "I'm not angry. I'm disappointed." "You're both." He stood, moved to her chair, and did something Lillian had never seen him do. He kissed his grandmother's cheek. "Thank you for everything, for helping us, for accepting Lillian, for being terrifying in all the right ways." Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "You're welcome, though I maintain this is a terrible decision." She looked at Lillian. "Take care of him. He's hopeless without proper management." "I'm sitting right here," Rowan protested. "I know. That's why I'm talking around you instead of to you." But Eleanor reached up and patted his hand. "You've done well, both of you. I'm proud, even if I'll never admit it again." They left Bath that afternoon in a proper carriage this time, with proper security, 4 outriders, and a driver who was former military. Rowan wasn't taking any chances after Blackwood's attack. The journey back to Everleigh Manor took 3 days. They stopped at coaching inns, ate mediocre food, and Lillian complained about her shoulder while Rowan fussed over her like she was made of glass. It was domestic and slightly boring and absolutely perfect. On the 3rd day, Everleigh Manor appeared through the trees. Gray stone and tall windows, exactly as Lillian remembered. But this time, looking at it, she didn't feel like an interloper. She felt like she was coming home. The staff had lined up to greet them, just like that first day. But this time, Mrs. Hewitt was smiling. Actually smiling. "Welcome back, Your Grace," she said to Lillian. "We heard about what happened in Bath. The whole household is relieved you're safe." "Thank you, Mrs. Hewitt." Lillian looked at the assembled staff. These people she'd gotten to know over the past months, who'd accepted her as their duchess, even when she had no idea what she was doing. "It's good to be home." Inside, everything was exactly as they'd left it. The morning room with the rearranged furniture, the gallery with her half-finished paintings, the library where they'd spent so many late nights drinking tea and not talking about feelings. Rowan disappeared into his study almost immediately. Apparently 3 weeks away meant 3 weeks of backed-up correspondence and estate business. Lillian wandered through the manor, reacquainting herself with the space until she found herself in the gallery. Her painting of the manor at sunset was still on the easel, exactly where she'd left it. She picked up a brush, tested the dried paint, and started mixing new colors. She worked for hours, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of painting, adding layers, building depth, trying to capture the way the light fell across the stone. She was so focused she didn't hear Rowan come in until he spoke. "You've been up here for 4 hours." She jumped, nearly dropping her brush. "You scared me." "Sorry." He came closer, studying the painting. "It's beautiful. You've gotten better. I've had a lot of practice and a lot to process." She set down her brush, flexing her hand. The sling made painting awkward, but she was managing. "Painting helps me think." "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. Bath, Blackwood, your grandmother, that speech I gave." She turned to face him. "I keep replaying it in my head, wondering if I said too much, if I embarrassed you." "You didn't." "I told everyone I married you for money." "You told everyone the truth. That takes more courage than I have." He pulled her close, careful as always with her shoulder. "You are braver than I've ever been. Standing there, owning who you are, refusing to apologize for surviving. He paused. "I was in awe of you." "You're just saying that because you love me." "I'm saying it because it's true. Though, yes, I do love you, desperately, inconveniently, in ways that make me want to cancel all my meetings and spend the day watching you paint." "That sounds terrible for the estate management." "The estate can survive one day without me." He kissed her softly. "Come on. I want to show you something." He led her downstairs, through the manor, out into the gardens. They walked past the formal plantings, past the small garden she'd started behind the kitchen, all the way to the far edge of the property where the woods began. There, in a small clearing, was a cottage. Not the rough gamekeeper's cottage she'd expected, but a proper small house. Fresh paint, new roof, smoke curling from the chimney. "What is this?" she asked. "Yours." Rowan opened the door. Inside was a single large room with enormous windows facing north, perfect natural light flooding the space. Easels lined one wall, shelves held paints and brushes and canvases. There was a small fireplace, a comfortable chair, a table for mixing colors. A studio. He'd built her a studio. Her voice caught. I sent word from Bath. Had the workers start immediately." He looked almost nervous. "I know the gallery in the manor is nice, but I thought you might want your own space. Somewhere you could work without worrying about making a mess or disturbing anyone. Where you could just create, whatever you want." Lillian walked through the space, touching the easels, the pristine canvases, the carefully organized supplies. It was perfect. It was everything she hadn't known she needed. "This must have cost a fortune," she said. "I don't care about the cost." "Rowan, I don't." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You gave up everything when you married me. Your independence, your freedom, your ability to make choices without considering what society would think. He paused. "This is me giving you back a piece of that. A place that's entirely yours, where you can be Lillian, not the Duchess, just you." She turned in his arms, tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much. And not just because you build me studios or move furniture or do any of the 1,000 quiet things you do. I love you because you see me, the real me. Not the desperate girl who needed saving, not the Duchess playing a role. Just me." "You're the only thing I see clearly," he said. "Everything else is just noise." They stood there in her new studio, holding each other as afternoon light poured through the windows, and Lillian felt something settle deep in her chest. Home. This was home. Not the manor, not the title, not even Bath or Eleanor's grudging approval. This. Right here. Rowan's arms around her and her own space to create, and the knowledge that she was chosen, not convenient, loved, not tolerated. This was what she'd been searching for all along. The weeks that followed fell into an easy rhythm. Rowan managed the estates, Lillian painted in her new studio, and they discovered what married life looked like when no one was trying to kill them or judge them or force them into social obligations. It was wonderful and domestic and occasionally boring in the best possible way. Mrs. Hewitt taught Lillian the finer points of household management. Cooks started asking for her input on menus. The maids stopped treating her like she might break at any moment. Thomas the footman got engaged to Margaret the kitchen maid, and Lillian helped plan a small celebration for them. She painted constantly, landscapes of the estate, portraits of the staff, abstract pieces when she was feeling emotional. The studio became her refuge, the place she went when she needed to think or process or just exist without expectation. And Rowan? Rowan kept being himself, quietly attentive, practically affectionate, showing his love through actions instead of words. Though he was getting better at the words too. One morning, about 6 weeks after their return from Bath, Lillian woke to find a note on the pillow beside her. "Meet me in the library after breakfast. I have something to show you." She found him there surrounded by papers, but he was smiling, actually smiling, wide and genuine and slightly manic. "What's happened?" she asked. "I've been thinking about what you said at the ball, about being real instead of perfect." He gestured at the papers. "And I realized I've been running these estates the way my father did, the way his father did, following tradition instead of thinking about what actually makes sense." "Okay, what if we changed things? Made them better?" He was talking faster now, animated in a way she'd never seen. "The tenant farmers, we could reduce their rents during bad harvest years instead of holding them to fixed rates. The staff, we could offer better wages, actual days off, pensions for long service. The grounds, we could plant crops that are actually useful instead of just decorative." "That sounds expensive." "It is, but it's also right." He looked at her intently. "You changed my life by being honest, by refusing to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. What if we did that with everything? What if we built something real here instead of just maintaining an image?" Lillian felt that familiar warmth blooming in her chest. This was why she loved him. Not despite his intensity, but because of it. When he cared about something, he cared completely. "I think that sounds perfect," she said. "What do you need from me?" "Your opinion, your ideas." He pulled her into his lap. "You grew up seeing how the other half lives. You know what it's like to struggle. I want to build something that actually helps people, not just looks good on paper, and I can't do that alone." "Yes, you can, but I'm glad you don't have to." They spent the rest of the morning planning. Lillian shared stories from her father's financial decline, the creditors who'd shown mercy and the ones who hadn't, the small kindnesses that had made survival possible. Rowan took notes, asked questions, started drafting new policies. By lunch, they had the outline of a plan. By dinner, they were arguing enthusiastically about crop rotation. By bedtime, they'd covered 3 walls of the study with ideas and calculations and schemes. "We're going to change everything," Rowan said, looking at their work. "We're going to try," Lillian corrected. "Some of this might fail." "Then we'll fail together." He pulled her close. "That's still better than succeeding alone." The changes started slowly. New contracts for the tenant farmers with flexible rent clauses, better wages for the household staff, updates to the workers' cottages that had been neglected for years, a school for the estate children, because Lillian insisted that education mattered more than formal gardens. Not everyone approved. Some of the neighboring landowners called Rowan radical, said he was spoiling the servants, setting dangerous precedents, forgetting his place in the social order. Rowan's response was to invite them to mind their own estates and stay out of his. Lillian watched him defend their choices with the same fierce protectiveness he'd shown defending her in Bath, and fell in love with him all over again. 6 months after their return from Bath, Eleanor came to visit. She arrived unannounced, which was very like her, in a grand carriage that scattered the chickens in the yard. The chickens were new. Lillian had convinced Rowan they should be more self-sufficient. He'd complained for a week and then built an elaborate coop that was nicer than most people's houses. "Chickens?" Eleanor said, staring at them with obvious distaste. "You have chickens." "They provide eggs," Lillian said diplomatically. "So do shops, without all the squawking and mess." But despite her complaints, Eleanor stayed for 3 weeks. She inspected every change they'd made, interrogated the staff about their new wages and working conditions, and generally made everyone nervous with her presence. On her last evening, she summoned them both to the drawing room. "I'll admit," she said without preamble, "I had my doubts about this marriage. About you, Lillian. I thought you were a fortune hunter. I thought Rowan was making a mistake driven by guilt and pressure." "Grandmother, let me finish." Eleanor fixed them both with a stern look. "I was wrong. What you've built here, this marriage, this life, these changes to the estate, it's real. It's good. It's better than anything I could have arranged for him." Lillian blinked. Thank you. Don't let it go to your head. You still have a long way to go." But Eleanor's expression softened. "You're good for him. You've made him happy. And more than that, you've made him better, more human, more connected to the world around him." "He did that himself," Lillian said. "I just gave him a reason to try." "No. You gave him an example to follow." Eleanor stood straight back despite her age. "You walked into the worst circumstances possible and chose honesty over pretense, chose love over safety, and in doing so you taught my grandson that vulnerability isn't weakness, that feeling things deeply doesn't make you less, it makes you more." She moved to the door, then paused. "I'm proud of you, both of you. Don't make me say it again." After she left, Rowan pulled Lillian into his arms. "Did that just happen?" he asked. "I think your terrifying grandmother just gave us her blessing." "She called you good for me." "She called us both better together." Lillian tilted her head back to look at him. "She's right, you know. We are better together." "I know." He kissed her forehead. "I've known since that first night in the library. When you couldn't sleep and came down for tea. When you sat with me in the quiet and it felt right, like that's what I'd been missing all along. Midnight tea sessions with an insomniac? Someone who understood that silence could be comfortable, that presence mattered more than conversation." He tightened his arms around her. "You've given me so much. A real marriage, a real home, a real reason to care about something other than duty and responsibility. You gave me all of that too. Safety, security, a place to belong." She paused. "And love. So much love, I don't know what to do with it all." "You could start by marrying me again." She pulled back to look at him. "We're already married." "I know, but the first time was a transaction. Cold, necessary, no feelings involved." He cupped her face gently. "I want to do it again, properly this time. With vows we write ourselves, with all our people present, with joy instead of desperation." "Rowan, marry me, Lillian, not because you need to, not because it's practical or sensible or solves a problem. Marry me because you love me and you want to spend the rest of your life building something real with me." Tears were streaming down her face. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said. Is that a yes?" "Of course it's a yes. It was always going to be yes." They planned the wedding, the real wedding, for the spring. Not a rushed ceremony in a small chapel, but a proper celebration at Everleigh Manor, with everyone they cared about present. The estate workers came. The household staff. Eleanor, of course, who complained about everything but cried during the vows. Even a few of the more open-minded neighbors who'd supported their estate reforms. Victoria Ashworth was conspicuously absent. She'd married Lord Ashford 6 months earlier in what everyone agreed was a loveless match designed to save both their reputations. Lillian sent her a wedding invitation anyway, because she could afford to be generous now. The ceremony was held in the gardens behind the manor, under trees strung with lights as the sun set. Lillian wore green again, emerald silk that caught the golden light, and Rowan wore gray that matched his eyes. They'd written their own vows, as promised. No traditional words about obeying or cherishing or until death, just truth. "I promise to see you," Lillian said, her voice clear and steady. "To pay attention, to notice when you need silence and when you need words, to love you in practical ways and impractical ways and every way in between. I promise to protect you," Rowan said. "Not because you're weak. You're the strongest person I know, but because I want to. Because making sure you're safe and happy and free to be yourself is the only job I actually care about. Everything else is just details." No vicar rushed them through the vows this time. They took their time, holding hands, looking at each other like they were the only two people in the world. When they finally kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers. The celebration afterward lasted until dawn. There was dancing. Lillian had gotten much better at it, and food from cook that was actually excellent for once, and speeches from Mrs. Hewitt and Thomas, and even Eleanor, who managed to compliment them without any insults. Rowan and Lillian slipped away before the party ended, walking hand in hand through the gardens as the sun started to rise. "This is what I wanted," Lillian said. "That first day when I signed the contract and thought my life was over. This is what I was too scared to hope for." "What, specifically?" "This, all of it." She gestured at the gardens, the manor, the life they'd built. "But mostly you, someone who sees me and chooses me anyway, who loves me not despite my mess, but including it. Your mess is my favorite part." "Liar." "Okay, yes, but it's a very close second." He pulled her into his arms. "You know what my favorite part actually is?" "What?" "How you keep surprising me. Every day you do something or say something that makes me realize I don't know you as well as I thought. And instead of being frustrating, it's exciting, like I get to keep discovering you over and over." "That's very poetic for someone who doesn't understand poetry." "I'm learning. You're teaching me." He kissed her softly. "You've taught me everything that matters. How to be vulnerable. How to be present. How to be human instead of just being a duke. You were always human. You just needed permission to show it." They walked until they reached her studio, now filled with completed paintings and works in progress. Evidence of the life she was building, the art she was creating, the space that was entirely hers. "I was thinking," Rowan said, looking at the paintings, "we should have a showing, display your work, invite people to see what you've created." "Why would we do that?" "Because you're talented. Because these deserve to be seen." He picked up one of her portraits, a painting of Mrs. Hewitt that captured both her sternness and her hidden warmth. "Because I'm tired of being the only one who knows how brilliant you are." I know you don't need it, but maybe you deserve it anyway." He set down the painting carefully. "You've spent so long taking care of everyone else, managing the household, helping with the estate reforms, being the perfect duchess. Maybe it's time someone took care of you for once." "You take care of me every day." "Then let me do it more publicly. Let me show everyone what I see when I look at you." His voice was fierce. "You're not just my wife. You're an artist, a reformer, a woman who survived impossible circumstances and came out stronger, and I want the world to know it." Lillian felt tears pricking her eyes again. She'd cried more in the past year than in the entire rest of her life combined. Happy tears mostly, the kind that came from being seen and valued and loved so completely it was almost overwhelming. "Okay," she said, "let's do a showing." The exhibition happened 3 months later in the Grand Gallery at Everleigh Manor. They invited everyone, neighbors, friends, members of Bath Society, even some of London's art collectors that Eleanor had connections with. Lillian's paintings lined the walls, landscapes of the estate in different seasons, portraits of the staff and workers, abstract pieces that captured emotion more than image, a whole series documenting the changes they'd made, the new school, the renovated cottages, the happy faces of people who finally had security. The response was overwhelming. People loved the work. Collectors made offers. 2 different galleries wanted to represent her. By the end of the evening, she'd sold enough paintings to fund another year of estate improvements. But the best part was watching Rowan move through the crowd, pointing out his favorite pieces, explaining the stories behind them, looking at her work with obvious pride. "You're staring," Eleanor said, appearing at Lillian's elbow. "I'm appreciating my husband." He's doing the same with you. Has been all evening." Eleanor sipped her wine. "It's almost nauseating how happy you two are. You love it." "I tolerate it. There's a difference." But she was smiling. "You've done well, both of you, built something that matters. That's more than most people can say. We're still figuring it out as we go. That's how it's supposed to work. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying." Eleanor paused. "I wanted to tell you I'm changing my will, leaving you the Bath properties, the cottage where you hid, the residence, all of it." Lillian stared at her. "Eleanor, I can't." "You can, and you will. Consider it payment for making my impossible grandson bearable." She patted Lillian's hand. "Besides, you'll actually use them, make them matter, turn them into something good instead of just symbols of wealth and status." Thank you for everything. Not just the properties, for accepting me, for helping us. You made it easy by being worth accepting. Eleanor's expression turned serious. You've given him something I couldn't. A reason to care about the world, a reason to be better. That's worth more than any inheritance. After the exhibition ended and the guests departed, Lillian and Rowan stood alone in the gallery, looking at the empty walls where the paintings had hung. You sold almost everything, Rowan said. I can make more. That's the point of art. It doesn't run out. I'm glad you kept some. He pointed to the wall behind them, where 3 paintings remained. The Manor at sunset, a portrait of him reading in the library, and a new piece she'd finished just last week, their hands clasped together, wedding rings visible, background abstract and dreamlike. Those are ours, she said simply. Not for sale. Not for anyone else. Just us. He pulled her close, and they stood there in the quiet gallery, surrounded by evidence of the life they'd built together. Do you ever regret it? Rowan asked quietly. Marrying me that first time, the cold transaction, the desperate choice. Never, not even for a second. She turned to face him. It led me here, to you, to this, to a life I actually want instead of one I'm just surviving. Good, because I don't regret it either. Best business decision I ever made. She laughed, smacked his shoulder lightly. Romantic. I'm working on it. He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. I love you. In practical ways and impractical ways, in quiet ways and loud ways, in every way I know how. I love you too, even when you're awkward and intense and forget that normal people need sleep. Especially then, I hope. Especially then. They left the gallery hand in hand, walking through the manor they'd transformed from a cold, empty house into a real home. Past the morning room where Lillian had her tea every day. Past the study where Rowan worked on estate business and she helped him plan reforms. Past the library where they still spent late nights when sleep wouldn't come, drinking tea and existing in comfortable silence. Their life together hadn't been perfect. It had been messy and complicated and occasionally terrifying. They'd faced creditors and ex-fiancés and attempted murder. They'd fought and cried and said things they regretted. They'd made mistakes and learned from them and made new mistakes. But through it all, they'd chosen each other, every single day. Not because they had to, not because it was convenient or practical or solved a problem, because they wanted to. Because somewhere between the cold transaction and now, they'd built something real. A marriage based on honesty instead of illusion. A love that showed itself through actions instead of empty words. A partnership that made them both better than they'd been alone. That night, lying in bed with Rowan's arms around her and moonlight streaming through the windows, Lillian thought about how far they'd come. From strangers signing a contract to partners building a life. From convenience to necessity to choice. What are you thinking about? Rowan asked sleepily. How lucky I am. How we took the worst circumstances possible and somehow made them into the best thing that ever happened to me. To us, he corrected. Best thing that happened to us. To us, she agreed. He kissed her temple, pulled her closer. I'd do it all again, every terrifying, impossible moment, as long as it led here. So would I. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, 2 people who'd found exactly what they needed in exactly the place they least expected it. Not in grand gestures or perfect romance, but in quiet moments and practical kindnesses and the steady accumulation of days spent choosing each other. Their marriage had started as a cold bargain between strangers, but it had become something neither of them could have predicted. A love built slowly, patiently, and undeniably real. A love that didn't need perfect words because it spoke through every action, every choice, every silent sacrifice. In a world of illusions, they'd chosen honesty. In a world of cold arrangements, they'd created warmth. And in each other, they'd found not just safety or security or convenience. They'd found home. They'd found purpose. They'd found love in its truest form, not given easily or without cost, but built deliberately, brick by brick, day by day, until it became the foundation everything else rested on. And that was worth more than all the perfect romances in the world.